Impact chapter. So Diego is French and Spanish, and he's in Madrid since 3 years ago. He studied politics, economics and philosophy at Sciences Po in Paris. He also has a master in international relations from Sciences Po and a master in sociology from Cambridge. At Cambridge, he studied, amongst others, the impact of social networks like Facebook on society. So then he worked at the Clinton Foundation in New York, and in 2009 he founded Amovens. So today he will present his company, a successful ride-sharing or carpooling company, and he will talk about his motivations to create this social enterprise and the impact it has on society. This social enterprise forms part of the collaborative consumption movement. This movement basically represents the fast and huge explosion of renting, bartering, swapping, sharing, renting that is being reinvented through technology. And it's being reinvented on very high, very big scales, and in ways never seen before. So some examples are social lending, crowdsourcing, co-working, car sharing, etc. So now I will leave the floor to Diego so that he can tell you more about Amovens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to speak to you about Amovens, as Marie-Laure said, which is the social enterprise I started about 2 years ago. And basically we'll go through, can you all hear me? Yeah? We'll go through just basically my motivations to start it, and I'll explain to you more into details what it consists in and how we've tried to grow. And then we'll try to draw some general reflections on my short and modest experience. First of all, Marie-Laure has told you that Amovens was a ride-sharing or carpooling company. Basically, we define ourselves as a social startup, and basically for those of you who are not totally familiar with ride-sharing or carpooling, we're speaking about the fact that people who share similar rides, either long rides, for example, from one city to another, or short daily rides, basically commutes, share just one car instead of going in several cars, and this brings a series of benefits both to themselves and to the rest of society, which basically consists in the following. I mean, first, it's cleaner, it's less CO2 emissions and contamination in general. It's also cheaper for themselves. There's more social interaction between people than when people drive on their own, each on their own in one car. And of course, there's also less traffic and mobility problems due to the fact that there's fewer cars on the roads. So, just one thing: carpooling or ride-sharing is not at all the same as car sharing, which you've probably also heard of. Recently, there's been a lot of noise around, for example, Zipcar, which is this big car-sharing company in the United States, and there's others in Spain and elsewhere. Car sharing is more, companies that have a pool of cars and that basically rent them in a much more flexible way than the normal car rental we're used to. So basically, you can sort of borrow one car one day rent one car one day for a couple of hours, and then basically not own your own car, but basically rent it whenever you need it on a very flexible basis. But that's not what we do. We don't have any cars. We basically just promote the fact that people concentrate in fewer cars for any types of rides when their trips or rides are similar. And just to put things into perspective, just in Spain, if only 2% of people shared their car instead of driving on their own, basically there would be a lot of both CO2 emissions and economic savings. We'd be speaking about 3,500 tons of CO2 emissions and €2 million in petrol daily, and this is only in Spain. But in Spain, just to give you, to be honest, I don't know the figures about other countries, but in large cities in Spain, there's only an average of 1.2 occupants per private vehicle. So basically, if there's an average of 5 seats per car, 3.8 seats are wasted. So basically, how did this start? As Marie-Laure said, we started in 2009, in early 2009. And basically, just to remind you of the context, I mean, the idea started really a few months before. Personally, I really wanted to start a company, and I wanted it to be a social enterprise. I wanted it to bring something else than just, you know, economic objectives. But I thought it was maybe wise. I didn't want it to rely on donations or be a foundation, but I preferred it to try at least to put it into a sort of viable structure of a company, basically. And at that point, there was really rising. I mean, most people basically thought that climate change was. I had already thought for some years that climate change was something to be tackled, and that was quite important. But at that point, really, the sort of general and public consciousness about climate change was quite important. Also the economic environment was really bad. I mean, the crisis had just started a few months before, and in Spain in particular, it seemed that it was going to be a very long and deep crisis with a lot of social implications, and which unfortunately has proven to be more than true. And also, just one more point. At that point, really, petrol prices had risen considerably. And of course, today are still historically very high. And also in Spain, I mean, the carpooling practice had been something that had started mainly. Well, first of all, this idea had existed since cars had existed. So, since the 1900s, there had already been some sort of like the idea of ride sharing had already existed. Of course, not in the same way as today. And in the 1970s, with the first petrol crisis, it was very popular in the US. They started with some carpooling lanes in which you could only drive if there were more than 2 or 3 occupants, for example. But in Spain, really, there had been some attempts to promote it and facilitate it, but they hadn't been very good and very successful. And so since I was here, I thought there was this empty space to try to promote this here, starting here. So we've already mentioned the term social enterprise a few times, and of course you're all familiar with what it is, but I think just to put it in the context of Amovens, what I thought was quite interesting as well is that, of course, I mean, I wasn't going to change the world just thanks to just putting together people in just fewer cars. However, I thought it was an interesting way to tackle different issues at once. I mean, both environmental, economic, social issues at once, and basically, encourage the idea and prove that the idea that if people were more collaborative, then we would, start solving some problems together and make better use of available resources, and that this would both benefit the environment, but also benefit, people themselves, which I think, in a large proportion, that's what collaborative consumption and the collaborative attitude is about. In terms of, Marie-Laure has already told you about my personal background, but the only thing I had to say is that I had no experience at all in either technology, internet, or company creation or business. So basically I was very much unprepared for that, which I don't think to some extent is a huge problem. And then the early timeline was the following. So basically the idea, I sort of started thinking seriously about the idea in autumn 2008. Then basically I created the company in February 2009, and the first version of the websites and services started in June 2009. So just to explain a bit the way we thought, or I thought initially about ride sharing, I thought, right, so this makes a lot of sense. We've already mentioned why. It's a way to save, it's a way to tackle environmental issues, etc. it makes all the more sense right now. So why is it not working already? I mean, we said the idea had existed for 100 years, and why isn't everybody sharing their cars? And basically, we thought about a couple of reasons that actually explain probably why, or at least category of reasons. And the first one was information. First of all, people didn't know massively about the existence of such possibility, you know, to just basically find other people to share the same rides with through the internet. And then also there's a practical barrier, which is, you know, how do I find somebody, what kind of tool can actually really provide me with the adequate information, and, you know, maybe I'm going to Valencia tomorrow on my own in my car, but how am I to find somebody who just lives at the same, I mean, maybe someone is leaving from my same block, but how can I connect to that person, etc. But also, and especially in Southern Europe, and probably in many other places in the world in which carpooling was particularly absent, the issue of trust was particularly important. I mean, the first thing when you speak to people here about this possibility is that generally people say, but how am I going to share a car, such a private space, with somebody I don't know? And people ask you, what if they rob me, rape me, etc. This we thought were the main barriers, and there's several ways we use to tackle those three barriers. But just to name one which I think is particularly important, and I'm going to speak about it more extensively later, we thought that it was key to basically organize partnerships with all types of institutions and try to sort of spread ride sharing within organizations. So, for example, through companies, universities, public authorities, and events. I mean, all these in several different ways to some extent, but basically the main idea is that through these institutions, a modest enterprise like ours, I mean, of course, we weren't going to advertise on TV every night, you know, Amovens.com, you can share cars through Amovens.com. So this was a way to sort of decentralize promotion and make, you know, institutions themselves sort of spread the news internally. Also, in the sort of practical question is also helped by the fact that people share generally at least one destination point. If we're speaking of, you know, work, for instance, people go and work to the same place. So it's sort of easier to create a critical mass for people to share their rides. Basically, the idea, I think, one way to put it would be to say that, you know, many services could sort of start working with 50 users or 100 users, but for ride sharing it's very hard, because basically if you have 100 users who are spread around, for example, in one country, and in Spain you'd have 15 in Madrid, 15 in Barcelona, 15 in Bilbao, then it would be very unlikely that these people would actually share rides, because, you know, you have to share not only one starting point, but also one destination point, and also there needs to be a time unity. Unlike other types of services in which, you know, there's no need to create such a specific critical mass. So basically, I'm going to explain exactly what these partnerships consist in. And just to speak to you, I mean, to illustrate a bit with images, basically how we do this. I mean, on the one hand, we have one public website which you can all check, even from here, which is amovens.com, open to the public. And then we have more specific solutions which are tailored for organizations and basically are a bit different from one another, but basically consists in ride-sharing programs that are basically like a website, but just internal to the organizations, with some sort of connections with the public network, which is centralized in amovens.com. And basically, I'm going to explain to you a few different steps of how it works. Basically, through all these platforms, you can basically publish rides, whether as a passenger or as a driver. And here we're seeing an example of someone who, in the public platform, would publish a ride. Now he would be just entering data about his car, saying, I will be a driver, for instance, and I'll drive, for example, for a long distance from Madrid to Valencia. Or someone can also just say, okay, this is not a one-shot long ride, but it's going to be a short daily ride to go to work, for example. So, for example, this person would live in Calle Embajadores in Madrid, and wouldn't be driving to Valencia but to Las Rozas, away from Madrid. And this is a fairly long distance to be driven every day. It's 25 kilometers one way. You can put either one way on a certain date, so this would be more if it would be Valencia, for instance, but you can also say, okay, this is going to be an everyday ride, and it's going to be a return ride. So I'm going, for example, from Monday to Friday, and I'm going at, say, well, 9 in the morning, and I'm returning at 5:30, let's say. And then the last step would consist in saying, okay, it's forbidden to smoke in my car, for instance. I offer X number of places, of seats. People will need to compensate me with €1 per day for each ride, or people can, after the first ride say, okay, we're going to make it easier, we're going to make it €20 a month, or whatever they decide. The actual platform helps you calculate this, because most people don't actually, have no idea of how much they should be asking for, per seat. It's not something they're used to charge for, and this basically becomes then a sort of available ride in the platform. And then anyone who actually would look for the ride, so this is another example, saying I'm looking for a ride from Madrid to Valencia, and you can see there's a certain number of rides going from Madrid to Valencia. You can narrow down the search by going to advanced search. You can also look at the website in English, of course, and you can look for a specific date, say 3rd of June, and you can say I'm looking for drivers only, and I want it to be named by price, and then you can see that on the 3rd of June, at whatever time you want, there's a couple of rides available, and you can ask for that person to take you, and of course there's an internal messaging system. So this works in a similar way both on the public platform, amovens.com, and on the platforms for organizations, which are basically similar, with some differences from one to the other. But basically these two features are pretty much similar. And so before I was telling you about the importance, I thought, of partnerships to sort of spread a social enterprise or organization and give it more, importance. And basically, there's different kinds of partnerships that we've personally done. The first kind is really to help expand the community, and I'm going to give you a few examples. One of the first things we thought was, okay, festivals, music festivals, are events in which a lot of people, essentially young people, but people of any age, actually go for the same days, and maybe might be more aware about these things and willing to share already something, since they're sharing the same, going to the same place. And so we started partnering with first a few festivals, and now it's more than 60 festivals, which basically, what they do is that if you go to the festivals, how to come to the festival section, you will find, here you can see this is FIB Benicassim, which is one of the major festivals in Spain, and you can see how to get there. Well, you can go there by car, there's a map, and then below is basically what you call a widget, which helps you find rides directly from the page's website. And then it goes to Amovens, to a page which summarizes all and gathers all the rides directly to that festival. And from there you can find people to ride to the festival with. So this is one of the ways we've really sort of expanded the critical mass. Ogilvy, this was another totally different examples, but at some point, for example, we organized a contest designed for advertising students, which basically consisted in a contest to create a video, the sort of like most viral video to promote Amovens and ride sharing. And we received a couple dozens of videos, which some of them were really good, some of them were really bad, but this basically then we put it on the social networks, and it helped sort of viralize the whole thing. And basically the winner would win an internship at Ogilvy. So the sort of quite simple partnership, but which helped you expand. Then last November, November, we managed to get Ford Spain as a sponsor, so this was of good help, mainly financially. And I'd say the most important partnership we've done up to date just started a few weeks ago, and has been definitely the most determinant, and it was with 20minutos.es and 20 Minutos, the newspaper, which you probably all know, which supposedly is the most read newspaper in Spain. And its website has about 13 million unique users a month. And basically, what this partnership consists in is that it's a sort of strategic alliance in which basically they bring us a lot of traffic. It's both on the website, but also backed up in the general newspaper. You can see a few weeks ago the big news was not the centerpiece of the newspaper, which you can see here, but this little thing here, which you might have missed, unfortunately. But basically, since the beginning of this month, or no, the end of last month, they've started advertising us in their newspaper, and of course also in their website. So for example, this was a news this very week, and they said, if you're caught by the if your plane has been cancelled because of the volcano in Iceland, think of sharing a car with Amovens. And as a sort of exchange, we've become parts, basically your traffic counts now as part of the Grupo 20 Minutos, which, since it's from May onwards. We also have a sort of agreement in which advertising in our website, so far we just have basically sponsorships but no advertising, and they're going to be managing it, which is great for us because we don't have a huge direct sales team that could go to every company in Spain and say, okay, do you want to buy some advertising in the Amovens sort of space, and basically they're going to be partly together with us managing this. So of course this has had a huge effect on traffic. I don't know if you're familiar with Alexa, which helps you which gives you a ranking of websites. And as we still have to grow a lot, but this has helped us considerably. There's also permanent links from 20 Minutos in their sort of like services section to us. The other types of partnerships are more the ones I was telling you about, and basically consists more in basically finding clients, because this is also one of the ways we receive financing, is basically selling those solutions, those internal solutions, ride-sharing solutions to companies or any type of organization. So basically, as I said, the targets can be companies, universities, public authorities, which we still don't have, but we're hoping to get. So for example, city halls, etc. And basically our value proposition consists in different aspects, like basically why would a company hire us to establish an internal ride-sharing system? Well, first there's a huge corporate social responsibility aspect, because it's a way for them to say that they're actively trying to involve their community to sort of save CO2 emissions, and by gathering employees in fewer cars. Then also there's a sort of human resources aspect, because it's a service that they offer their employees or their students in the case of a university. And also in terms of logistics it can be useful, because many places, for example in Spain, have huge parking problems. So for example, if you go to Telefónica one day, which is not a client of ours, but we're hoping to get someday, there's basically cars that have to park. They need basically 4x4s, because you need to park in places which are quite hostile, sometimes 5 kilometers away from the actual buildings. So just by reducing by 1% or 2% the number of cars that actually go to the company, it's as if they built X number of parking slots. We offered companies or universities different levels of services. So basically, there's a sort of basic, premium, and standard and premium version, depending on the level of personalization of the platform we offer, and depending on whether we also bring them services such as information days to promote the system, etc. And it's been very tough actually to manage to get the first companies and universities on board. paradoxically, the first few ones were quite actually easy to get, but then we've been struggling to convince these institutions to actually contract us. But we're actually seeing that it's really taking off, and it's been taking off for a few months, so we're quite happy. And for example, we started inside Banque Sabadell last December, and there's more than 400 people using the system, since their main, or one of their main corporate headquarters are in Sant Cugat, just outside Barcelona. It's very hard to access, so people all drive there. And basically it's worked quite well. These are a few examples of different universities and companies basically that have our system working internally. And this is also a new platform we started a couple of weeks ago, and which was our first sort of international step towards getting international. And it's a platform that's made for Ericsson and the Swedish road authorities in Stockholm. It's a pilot version for a year, and it's started quite well. So this would be an example of very sort of tailored program for a specific company. Yeah, so just a few words. Of course, we're trying to be as present as possible in social networks, also to just sort of spread the news. We've done several contests through Facebook. We've also tried to do a lot of viral actions, trying to maximize each euro that we spend to basically make ourselves known. So we've organized, for example, demonstrations in favor of carpooling at traffic lights in very busy places, in which basically every time the traffic light would go red, would basically deploy a huge share your rides Amovens.com sort of banner. And I suppose also because it's been, because people like to sort of give positive messages during times of crisis, and also because of the environmental aspect, this has just helped us a lot to be quite present in the media, which really gives you a lot of free visibility, both in the written media, in radio, and sometimes on television. So just a few general reflections. To sum up, first, why do I enjoy doing this? Well, first of all, I think what's very interesting when you start something like that is the diversity of what you do on a daily basis. I mean, I personally didn't have much experience of working in general. I was almost straight out of university. It's not because I wasn't doing anything. It was just because I was studying and I'd worked a bit, but more in research and things that didn't have anything to do with starting an organization. And of course, when you start with limited resources, you're led to just basically, in the beginning, especially in the beginning, just occupy all positions and do very diverse work, ranging from supervising technological developments to basically, finances, marketing, media, etc. And also, it's also diverse because of in the case of Amovens, was quite thrilling, is that basically you deal with many different kinds of actors, of ranging from, in one same day, from leaders of multinational companies that you're trying to convince to contract a ride-sharing service, to people in rectorates of sort of deans of universities, to someone in a festival you're going to try to convince that it's cool to share rides to get to the festival. And it's also a great way to observe, totally different environments within the sort of economic and social landscape, dealing with all those different kinds of actors. Of course, there's a lot of downside. I mean, yeah, I was speaking of the sense of purpose. This is sort of obvious, but it's always great to do your own thing and basically choose your own goals and objectives yourself. The downsides is that I haven't insisted much here. But when you start your own thing, and that it's something that has to create links, all these, I was speaking about the importance of partnerships. The sort of like bad side of the story is that for every partnership you do, you have to be fighting for 6 months and going to see about 100 people and try to convince them that it's great, but most of the time you just basically get rejected in a very unpleasant way. And of course there's a very asymmetric relationship with lots of companies you deal with that know they're much bigger than you are and are not nice with you. And to finish, I'd like to speak about the importance of getting a great team. Not only the importance, but how tough it is to really find people to work with you that have the same motivations. I mean, the case of Amovens, in the very beginning, for the first couple of months, I was on my own. Then the team expanded, and there's now 7 of us. But you know, it's very hard to find the people that basically share the same motivations, that don't feel just like employees, but that feel that they're really motivated by the whole project. And just to give you a quick example, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, as I said, I didn't have any experience of technology initially, and basically I subcontracted the first version of the website and of the technological infrastructure to an external company initially, which was probably a bad decision, but I didn't have anyone to rely on the sort of technical side. So we basically had to sort of throw away the first version of the website about a year later. And until I didn't find someone who really shared that motivation, who was ready to basically do the same bets, who didn't know if it was going to work out initially or not. Until I didn't find this person about a year and a half ago who joined the team and who's now our CTO, it was you really felt sort of, you know, left alone, and especially I didn't, as I said, I didn't know anything about technology. And at the same time, it's very motivating to find such people when you actually happen to find them. So that's it. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have any questions.
Hey, I totally see your project. I actually love it. And this winter I've been working for a ski resort that they've been promoting the own car sharing called bike sharing. But my question is, like, yeah, it's totally doable for festivals, punctually events, or for instance ski resorts, because you have to go outside of the city, or offices that are outside of the city as well. But do you think there's hope to make people think out of the box and do it like in regular basis in their everyday lives? Not just for a regular thing, but make people go on the website, do the effort to, you know, enter their routine or their plans and share the right. Do you think that's possible in Spain here?
It'd be quite sad if my answer was just a straight no. I don't think it's...
Of course it's not going to be straight no, but you know, it's
No, of course. Well, I mean, first of all, I think if you just take into account regular rides or one-shot rides on the one hand, and on the other side of the table you take into account short and long distances, I think it can work in 3 of those cases, which are basically, but in one of them it can't, and there's a short distance punctual thing. For example, after this, I'm just going somewhere else, 5 kilometers away from here. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to, hook up on the website and just say, okay, I mean, maybe there is, but unless everyone is actually on Amovens constantly, I'm not going to find somebody on such a flexible basis. So we're sort of quite realistic in that sense.
Are you putting effort into like everyone in, work quickly? And
I mean, the thing is, on the long term, and we're already sort of thinking about it to make it more flexible, we're trying to find a method basically to make it work more with SMS and stuff like that. And I think the development of smartphones might actually benefit also this. And for example, the iPhone app is going to be released in July, and this might help. But I mean, we're trying to be realistic here, and I think it can basically, for now, work. And I think this can also, already make a sort of difference. I think it can work for short distances on a daily basis to go to work, especially in Spain. Lots of people have exactly the same, like times of work, and for example, work from 8 to 3 in the summer or 8 to 4 or whatever. So I think it can work like this. And then for long distances, I think the context really helps us, and of course we're asking, I'm not expecting 100% of people to find the service useful or to say, oh, of course I'm going to give sort of my little flexibility up all always, but I find a lot of people who've used the system who probably wouldn't have a few years ago. And now I think everybody's become more conscious both about the way they spend their money and about the way they contaminate the environment. And I think people in a larger and larger segments feels better if they go from Madrid to Valencia, with somebody else instead of their own. And then of course we might be speaking of, we are speaking of something really niche today, and I'm not claiming, of course, that today we've completed these goals, but I think it can become a larger and larger segment and then become a sort of much more dominant way to get around.
I have another short question. From our ski resort, they are promoting this, this car sharing through prizes, sort of like discounts on the ski passes, and then some raffle at the end of the season to see who's been the more active user and stuff. Do you do those kind of prize giving things in the companies?
What we do is with the institutions we work for, so for example in Bank Sabadell, we try to promote this internally, and we try to say, okay, for example, establish, as you said, for daily rides, the thing that would work most is preferential car park. So for example, especially when it's hard to park in a company, if the company sets 20 car slots for carpoolers, this generally attracts a lot of people. And for example, in Bank Sabadell, this is probably what explained that so many people registered initially. We're trying to expand that into other types of benefits for and perks for the employees that actually register. And then on our website and in general, what we try to do is do prizes. And for instance, now what we generally do with when we partner with festivals or concerts, they generally give us tickets for us to give to our community. So we basically say, if you publish your ride, you can basically win tickets to go here or there, and we're going to try to do this much more.
Well, hopefully someday we won't need prizes for it.
Exactly.
Hi, I have a question related to the trust. You said that one of the main barriers for your business is do people feel safe driving with strangers? So my question is, to what extent has this actually been a problem for Amovens, and how are you addressing this issue?
So one of the ways we address it is that within institutions there's already a sort of pool of trust. Basically, if you work in such or such companies, if you study in another university, you're going to be much more likely to trust somebody that you don't know from your own institution rather than a total stranger. And we're trying to and of course, if you're working in a place with 2,000 people, you might know 150 if you're very sociable, but the large majority of them you're not going to know, and you're not going to know that they're shared similar rides as you do, but you might be more likely to share a ride with them. And then we're trying to do this bit by bit, expand this idea to the fact that, for example, if you know that somebody works in a different company that's not even yours, but if you have the proof that this person, for example, is registered with a company email and therefore is part of the Bank Sabadell network, if you work at Telefónica, but you know that this other person works really at Bank Sabadell, and the person knows that you work at Telefónica, this is going to provide also mutual trust. We're trying to, there's a lot of things in that line that are in the sort of technological pipeline we have. And for instance, there's a sort of, we don't want to reproduce a whole social network, but we're trying to establish a system with circles of trust. So for example, if I've shared a car with you and your friend is in your own social circle, then I can see that this person is in my sort of second circle, and that's also a way to help guarantee trust. Then there's a system of ratings, like in eBay or any other sort of network like this in which you need trust. So after a ride, you can go and rate the other user and give him from 0 to 5 stars and put a comment. So if you see a good track record of someone, it's also a way to basically provide trust. And then one thing which used to be compulsory until a few weeks ago which is now optional, is that we have basically people needed to provide their own telephone number when they would register in the platform. In Spain, all phone numbers, all phones, all mobile phones are registered with IDs, and so you would basically receive an SMS with an authorization code, and then you would have to copy this code to validate your account. So this would guarantee a sort of slightly more serious type of registry than just provide a Hotmail address. The problem with this is also that paradoxically a lot of people who go to Amovens are actually part of the people who don't care that much about trust, who are are already sort of happy to share and they don't think that much, oh, I'm going to be robbed or whatever. So this would actually put a lot of people off from registering. So it was a huge barrier, and from every 100 users we'd have that would go to the registration page, a lot of them would say, oh, I don't want to register somewhere that actually asks me for my mobile, or like in any other service. Even though we explained why you had to provide your mobile, people would put like 000, and so they would never get the text, and so they'd never be able to register. So now we've made it optional, and now there's sort of secure users and just normal users. So you have the option to just give your phone number and become a secure user afterwards. So these are little tricks that we use to create trust.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, here. In your opinion, what is driving your users to use Amovens? On your website, you put that it's green and cheap. How do you feel here in Spain, the green consciousness of people? Are they more participating because it's green or because it's cheap?
Well, basically, final users, if we're speaking of actual users of the website, not companies or organizations, it's much more powerful to say you're going to save money rather than you're going to be greener. There's a segment of users who actually care much more about the environment, but generally for final users, what they see is they've saved 50 euros on a ride from here to Bilbao instead of just spending the whole money. So I'd say our marketing is more in terms of final users about the sort of economic savings. And also the social side, because especially if you've done it once, then you realize that when you share your car once with unknown people, a lot of the time it's going to be people you would probably not have the opportunity to meet in the sort of normal context. For example, if you study here, you would probably not work with someone who works as sort of in small, as a worker in a company outside Madrid. If you're an abroad student here, for example, for a year, it's just going to lead you to meet any kinds of people, and at the same time, in one car, at the end, you're going to have people who just go to a festival. I'm speaking of examples I know, and I've used it myself. And basically, you're going to share a car with exactly just people who are going to a festival, and people who just go to Burgos every other week to see their family, and just people who just share their car for very different reasons, but they end up all in the same car. And it's actually quite enriching. It's not just bullshit. It's actually really true, and it really appeals to people. So I think the social and the sort of economic sides might be more powerful for people. For organizations, I say the sort of green side and the sort of CSR side is more directly appealing, also because they're not the ones saving. The employees or students would be the ones saving.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. So you said that basically you put a price on the ride.
Yes.
From a fiscal point of view, does it have any implication?
From a what point of view, sorry?
From a fiscal point of view, from a tax point of view. So you just go to a car and you pay cash to the guy who's providing the ride?
Normally not, and the reason why is that unless you have a license to really charge for people, for example, I suppose a taxi driver or anyone with a license to basically do commercial transport could use this to maximize their benefits or just find other opportunities. But if you don't have, which is basically what the situation most of the people, you and I, would be in, it's not so much about charging, but just contributing to the expense of the ride. Why do we want people to actually set a price before? Because if people, the day of the ride, actually just turn up and say, okay, by the way, you owe me 50 euros because I've just because my car is actually very expensive to keep, and I had to go to the, you know, like you have to contribute to the general cost of the car. Maybe there's going to be some sort of conflict during, you know, the day of the ride, and people are going to say, what do you mean 50 euros? I mean, I can't believe we've even spent 10 liters of petrol, and so. We prefer to people to set a cost that's established before. Of course, this is imperfect because if one people shares the car with you, it's not the same as if 3 people share the car with you. So the sort of like general price we sort of recommend is an average. You know, it corresponds to about the amount as if 3.5 people would be in the car in total. And people are free to change it anyway. But from a fiscal point of view, it would be like friends sharing the costs of a ride, and to be honest, we're speaking of generally rather small transactions in any case. So if it became totally general, and if this were done through, you know, direct debits through bank accounts, maybe it would raise some preoccupations from a fiscal point of view, but so far I don't think so. And also I have to say that the public authorities, I didn't even mention it, but you know, a couple of months ago, for example, I'm speaking of Spain, the Spanish government, within all these measures to actually save energy, basically they, you know, the most famous one was the 110 kilometers per hour, but another one was the promotion of ride sharing, and they're about to launch a sort of initiative to give more visibility to initiatives like ours. To promote it, so you know they couldn't be on the one hand, and they know that the economic aspect is what drives people to share rides more than anything. So I don't think they're going to be too annoying with this.
Okay, one last question. Okay.
Hi. Do you have any contingency plan if companies like Fahrengelegenheit that is doing this in Germany from a long time ago is coming and decide to come here to Spain to do this?
Well, actually, the one you mentioned, which
Yeah.
no, you said Mietfahrzentrag. Well, there's two in Germany. There's two big initiatives in Germany like this. That, I mean, with the same objective as ours. That, as you say, have been working for a long time, for about 10 years. And there in Germany, the cultural barrier is lower, and people are just maybe naturally more ready to share their rides. And of course, they have an advantage because they've been there for a long time. Actually, one of them, Mietfahrengelegenheit, is trying to come into Spain. And you know, even though we're a social enterprise, it's always annoying to have more competitors. But I think basically it's, although it would be more efficient in a way, unlike other markets, if people actually concentrated on just one platform, because the critical mass would actually you know, concentrate in just one place. I think there's basically room for different players in this sort of small market. And also I should say that the German model, and actually in France as well, there's basically websites like this which are more designed exclusively for long distance rides. It's not so much to share rides on a short distance and, for example, go to work, but because of the way they're built and the platforms work, you can't really share rides on a daily basis for a short distance. And I suppose because it was harder to promote this in Spain, maybe we've had also to do more efforts to do a sort of slightly more thought of version of, I mean, you know, technology and a system. And so I suppose this, together with the fact that we've been here for now a couple of years and that we have more users, also gives us some sort of advantage. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Diego. And so we are now 2 hours here at the EOI conference, and I think we can already draw a nice conclusion that, I mean, we need social entrepreneurs, we need leaders, but we also need a new together, I think. And I want to invite you now all warmly in the name of the EOI and of the team to share with us lunch in the garden, and see you outside. Yeah.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. ¿Qué tal? Sí. Soy español. Muchas gracias.
No sabía que estaba...
Sí, pues te invito a...
Sí, no lo voy a usar porque
a mirarlo y la verdad es que funciona cada vez mejor.
Necesito ir mucho a Barcelona también y en avión es súper caro.
Claro. Y cada vez más para Barcelona, la verdad es que está funcionando bastante. O sea, conozco a bastante gente que lo ha usado y...
Enhorabuena,
Muchas gracias.
Voy a ser usuario,
Ah, qué bien.
Te prometo que te voy a contestar.
Me alegro.
Porque yo voy todos los fines de semana de Madrid a Valencia.
Pues...
Y voy a meterme,
Además de